Hey guys, and welcome to another video. This is going to be on area of effect and weapon range. I see a lot of people when I'm doing Dr. Dummy videos that don't know the difference between weapon range and area of effect, and they end up wasting a lot of zodiac points or a lot of stuff in gear. So I decided to do this video. Hopefully it will help distinguish better between the two and what the big sources of the two are. Yeah, that's it. Let's get into this thing. Okay, let's start basic. Weapon range and area of effect are not the same thing. Okay, let's get that right out of the way up front. I see a lot of people that confuse the two, or that they think they're just differently worded versions of the same thing. Totally understandable. In this game, lots of things are horribly worded and confuse the heck out of everybody. This is not one of them. The best way to check to see if a thing uses weapon range or area of effect is really simple. It has the tag. This one you can see has area of effect. This one you can see has weapon range. I know reading is hard. I'm not a big fan of it myself. But this is something that is straightforward and is very overlooked. Tags on your skills, attacks, spells, everything are very important in this game, and it is really easy to overlook stuff, especially when you're talking about awakenings and things that change stuff. Recently, I found out something. This is completely unrelated to weapon thing, but I just want to show that these things happen. So I'm using Quick Slash on my hardcore character right now, and I want to do some testing with the Verity Awakening, which changes how the skill functions. And it removes the shadow tag because it is it changes how the skill works. I didn't know that. So there are times when things like that are going to happen, but when it comes to area of effect and weapon range, they are different. That's the start, okay? So the differences between weapon range and area of effect. Typically, weapon range talks about attacks that are in straight lines. Sometimes it doesn't. Okay, but typically you can think of it more that weapon range is from an attack and the actual reach of a weapon, where area of effect could be projectiles or spells. So that's the start. Okay. Now, since someone asked about it, this is the reason I'm doing the video in the first place. Is I'm going to explain where all the major sources of area of effect are and the differences between some of the things. So let's get into that. Actually, quick, before I get to the other stuff. So in prepping for this video, I came through and I did notice, so there are two things that contain both weapon range and area of effect, and this could be confusing. So I'm going to talk very quickly about those two skills. They are Explosive Slash and Bloodshed. And the way to tell what is giving what is really easy to tell in terms of what it's going to do. Looking at the skill itself, you can see that Explosive Slash has a hit, okay, and then a timer, and then a bomb, okay? Obviously, the AoE is going to be the explosion radius from the bomb, and your weapon range is going to be the reach that you can set the bomb onto an enemy. The same thing, more or less, happens with Bloodshed, whereas the hits are from the weapon range, and then the circle on the ground afterward is the AoE. There you go. So that clears that up. There are skills with both, but most of the time, attacks have either AoE or weapon range. Okay, weapon range. Now, I am no particular expert on this subject. I have done very few builds that actually use weapon range in any way, but I'm going to try to talk about it as best I can. We're going to start with the base number, and the base number is always going to come from the weapon itself. Now, you'll notice as I go through, they have weapon range on all of them. Generally, the longer the weapon, so dagger has a short range, axe has a longer range, two-handed weapon has a much longer range. You will notice things that only cause spell damage, okay? Stabs cause both, but things like wands that only cause spell damage don't have weapon range because you can't use them for weapon range. Pretty simple. Because again, the weapon range is the ability of you to hit with that weapon. You're never going to walk up and bonk someone with a wand. I don't think it would do much damage, personally. Some of them have longer. You will also notice that bows do not have weapon range. Duh, because you're not hitting with the bow, you're hitting with the arrows. And this is going to be the biggest value you need to worry about. If you are someone who really, really wants your build to have super far range, long-range weapons, two-handed weapons are all going to be your best bets. So I'm using a quick strike build right now on my hardcore, and I'm using sword and shield because I am playing hardcore and I want the extra survivability. But that does mean I need to get closer to my enemies. Now I'm using a setup that intentionally wants me closer to my enemies, but if you want a longer range, obviously a longer weapon is going to be better. Some weapons also come with an implicit baked in that gives you even more weapon range. It does vary depending on the tier of the gear. I haven't worked with many builds that use it, but there are some. If you look, first, the sword has 260 equipped weapon range and a 55 equipped weapon range implicit, versus the axe, which has a 240 and a dot implicit. Some of these are obviously going to be better, and depending on how much you care about weapon range, that's going to make a difference. That's the start. That's the base number. All of your other stuff is going to be based off of this number. The difference with area of effect is that area of effect typically comes, the base of it comes from the skill itself. So if you look at something like Illusion Axe, it comes with the area of effect on here. It isn't affected by the weapon that you use. Any weapon you use is going to give it the same base range. Now, you can obviously affect both of these with different things, but that's where the base values come from. So when you look at skills, if you're trying to find out if it's a weapon range or an area of effect, if you can't read the thing, they have weapon range versus area of effect on. So those are the values you're going to be starting with, and any modifiers you make are going to modify those values. So think about that when you're using a skill. If you're going to use something like combo, you want more weapon range so you can hit the enemies farther away. Or you can, again, give up that weapon range so that you can get in close and do more if you're using skills that hit close. Okay, so let's talk, now that we know where the base values come from, let's talk about the good places to get modifiers for these. Okay, I've decided to start with the unique gear, and I've picked a few. This is not all of the stuff that has area of effect. And for those of you that don't really know, you can search for stuff. So in this case, I have area. No, I don't. I have stick because I was doing something else. So you can simply copy it and hit area, and it will show you all the pieces that have area of effect. Now, when it comes to finding something for area of effect that is a unique, a lot of these pieces are sort of build specific, and there are way more than I'm going to mention. I'm just going to mention the handful that I think are important to either certain builds or just in general kind of cool. So we're going to start here with the Transcendent Vespers Venom Fang. It's got a nice chunk of area of effect, but it is specific to the Deadly Poison Skewer build. I tried to play Deadly Poison Skewer. I think it's kind of cool. This piece of gear would make it significantly better than it is. So I think that would be something you would have to get if you were really wanting to deal with that thing. Overall, it's a good weapon. It's got it's got good base damage. It's got good overall. It's not particularly amazing, but if you were going to do a Deadly Poison Skewer, this would be kind of cool. The next is a one-handed axe that is not on its own very good, but it is something that if you were going to use dual-wield axes, I think it could be a solid offhand. It doesn't have particularly good damage, so end game it's something that you're definitely not going to end up with, but progressing through the story, it's got really good critical rate. It's got hit point absorb on attack. It's got area of effect and area damage amplification. Just the kind of cool axe I thought I'd bring up. The Transcendent Mountain Root is the next one. It is a very, very solid weapon. With some quality on it, this is actually a weapon that you could main for most of the builds that would work with it. It's got great stun rate, it's got solid critical rate, it's got area of effect and crit damage and melee damage amp. It's got a whole bunch of stuff. Super good. Now, there is the Mountain Root, the less powerful version, which is, again, very good, especially if you're starting out playing and trying to use a two-hand or a one-handed blunt and want to get some area of effect. Next is the two-handed sword, the Infinite Gale. Again, not something you would necessarily go with endgame, but if you were starting out on one of the two skills that I talked about, that I don't remember the name of, that use both weapon range and area of effect, this is a really solid weapon out of the gate. Solid attack speed, or solid attack damage, solid speeds, very solid critical rate, big weapon range, and area of effect. It's a weapon that I think would work really, really well, at least early on, for players that are using either of those skills. And it could also be very good for players using not those skills that just need good weapon range. Again, not something that you would necessarily go deep into the end game with, but it is a pretty cool little sword. The next is a two-handed blunt. The Spike of Evil Abolishment. Very cool non-crit weapon, because obviously it's got crit hit disabled. I don't necessarily think this is something you would run in many cases, because crit is generally going to end up stronger in the long run. But overall, I mean, it's got really good stuff on it. 18% damage taken dampening is really good for a two-handed weapon. It's got area of effect. It's got a huge amount of armor penetration, which would leave you space to not have to worry about that elsewhere. And the rend armor is kind of a cool thing if you're a physical user. But again, the crit hit disabled sort of limits what you can do with it. The last really big one that I want to talk about, and I know everybody's screaming at the screen, who knows what the next thing I'm going to talk about. But here is the Miracetti's Sailboat Shield. It is a viciously hard to get shield. It is disgustingly good. Everything about it kicks ass. And it's got a plus 50 area of effect. And the important thing here is, you'll notice it's a plus 50, not a plus 50%, which means it is a base value. Changing the base AoE of things makes a much bigger difference than changing the percentage of it. This thing is an absolute juggernaut when it comes to shields. It's got everything you want, but that plus 50 area of effect is huge. Now, I'm going to talk about another one. This is the one everybody who knows what's going on is already yelling about. It is the Watcher's Stick. It is a staff, and it's got a whole bunch of everything. If you are talking about a piece of gear or a build that really wants either weapon range or area of effect, this is your guy. The downside of it is, it's not a particularly good weapon on its own. It doesn't have super great damage. I mean, it's not bad, don't get me wrong. Especially if you were starting out, you can definitely use it. But this thing's best served doing in your Lacrima. If you can get a unique Lacrima with a two-hander, this thing is absolute juggernaut. I don't know why I've used Juggernaut so many times. I think probably because I just watched the Deadpool with Juggernaut. Anyways, it's got huge equipped weapon range, and it's got area of effect, and they kind of build off of each other. If you have more weapon range, it gets more area of effect. If you have more area of effect, it gets more weapon range, kind of thing. It's not like that at all, but it's definitely something, if you are trying to get either weapon range or area of effect, this is your buddy in your Lacrima. There are, obviously, if you don't mind using a staff, this is solid. Again, low attack speed, not particularly great damage, but in your Lacrima, it's a powerhouse. Okay, let's go over to some of the uniques that use weapon range before we move on. Okay, uniques for weapon range. When it comes to weapon range, there's a lot less uniques that actually affect weapon range other than having a base weapon range. I'm going to talk about a couple of them. Most of them are two-handed swords because generally the builds that use weapon range are going to be using two-handed swords. So I'm going to talk about the Brilliant Eye-Piercing Crescent. It is a solid starter range weapon, and it can be a solid Lacrima unique weapon as well for weapon range to start, at least until you get something better, because it's a fairly low level, and its Brilliant Crescent effect does apply when in the Lacrima. So every hit within 4 seconds will give you up to 10 stacks of plus 15 weapon range and 4% attack speed. So that's 40% attack speed and 150 weapon range, which can be very nice as a starter using this weapon with a weapon range build. The next bigger one is the Queen. This is like bare bones, super solid, basic weapon when it comes to weapon range. It's got a big weapon range, it's got good damage, it's got good speed, it's got good crit rate, it's got some damage amp and some hit point absorb. Very, very solid thing. Little harder to get, obviously, but very, very solid if you're looking for a weapon range two-hander. And then comes the Teneo's Cursed Two-Handed Sword. This weapon only drops from Teneo on the tier 12. I don't remember what the map is called. It's the map you get from doing Custodia unique maps. This thing is absolutely wild in terms of weapon range and area of effect and stuff. It's a really crazy thing. I'm not sure how effective it would be in Lacrima, but overall it's a pretty wild weapon because it gets weapon range based on chaos resist, it gets area of effect based on weapon range, and it gets maximized damage based on weapon range, which all of those sound really, really good to me. Again, I've never used this, but overall it looks very, very solid. I think it would probably be a very good two-handed weapon when it comes to weapon range. The next one is a two-handed axe called Cassor's Vision. Now, this thing was all the rage when it first came out. This thing was absolute king when it came to weapon range because you can get... so it starts with 240 plus the 55 implicit and up to 240 equipped weapon range from rolls. It's got good attack speed. It's got good crit rate. It's got very solid attack damage. It's got crit damage. It's got maximized damage. It's got it all. I don't know how much they are anymore. I know they were very, very expensive back in the day. Very, very solid weapon when it comes to weapon range if you're looking for that kind of thing. The other one I do want to talk about quick is another thing. It's a shoulder that's actually weapon range or AoE. I had a brain fart there. It's not a particularly great one. It doesn't do anything spectacular, but if you're looking for a shoulder in a Lacrima, it does give weapon range and area of effect. Again, it's nothing special, but it is something that does both, and I thought it would be something I want to bring up. And then, obviously, it goes without saying, the Watcher's Stick, I already talked about it, is spectacular for weapon range. Okay, so that's it for uniques. Let's go into the Lacrima and talk about some of the options, or not Lacrima, my god, into the Zodiac. I'm really tired. Let's go into the Zodiac and we'll talk about some of the weapon range options and the AoE options. Okay, weapon range Zodiac. Now, again, the search bar is your best friend when it comes to these kinds of things, but I'm going to go through them anyway. There is a small amount in the first trait, Strong Strike, gives you +5 weapon range. It's something you're very likely going to hit anyway, as it's pretty much the only good melee thing. After that, there's nothing up until 6 when you come down into Sweep. Now, this is a really good choice because you're going to get a bunch of stuff along the way. You're going to get weapon range, attack speed, enhanced rune cost. You're going to get some strike damage, and then you're going to get 6% strike damage amp and some weapon range there. This is a pretty standard thing when it comes to weapon range builds. After that, there are 2 down in 7. The first one is Rock Collision, which is pretty solid. It doesn't have much along the way. Yes, you get a little bit of strike damage, you get some hit rate, you get some attack speed, but it's not much. But it is plus 30 weapon range, and it's generally accepted that that's where you're going to end up going if you're a weapon range build. Then there's another one that I definitely do not recommend, which is certainty. You get some weapon range, it's only plus 20, and you get 12% melee damage dampening. Obviously, that's not super ideal. That's a lot of dampening. Definitely better places to get weapon range, but if you're really desperate for it, there is a place to go. But again, I cannot recommend this. After that, there's a bunch of specialties that all have some weapon range. The big one is hammer, but we're going to talk about the others quick. This one in steel, has blast furnace, so you get quite a bit of weapon range along the way, 15%. Damage increased by your weapon range up to 150%, which is, I mean, a decent amount of damage, but it's not that spectacular. Another 35% weapon range, and then some melee damage amp. It's solid if you want to go into the steel tree, but it's not a huge amount of damage, but it's not bad, obviously. Up here in shade, there is the weapon range down into area damage amplification. Again, I feel like this is probably one of the, if you're using a build that does both weapon range and area damage, because you're getting weapon range along the way, but you're getting area damage amplification, which isn't going to affect your weapon range skills, if they're weapon range only. Again, not bad if that's what you're going into. I haven't looked into the rest of the tree, obviously. I'm just going with the weapon range stuff. In respiration, there's another weapon range one. I don't really recommend if you're just trying to get weapon range going into here. Again, not knowing your build. Obviously, whatever build you're using might be different. But this is maximized damage and crit, and it's not even that big. I don't feel like it's a good use of a zodiac point in specialty if you're focusing on weapon range. But it does have a second thing also with weapon range, which is, where was it? Down here, another 25% with some melee damage. Again, I honestly don't feel like if you're a weapon range build, this is a particularly good tree. In my opinion, if you are going to use a weapon range build, going into hammer is going to be the way to go. The initial point is only a 25% weapon range, and Fatal Strike is honestly not worth it. But the rest of the Zodiac is very strong. And then up in Flame has Enrage, which gives you a nice 25% weapon range that swaps every 4 seconds. I think it's probably the best out of them, but again, I don't know your build. Outside of that, there is nothing else in the Zodiac that affects weapon range, and again, most of this you'll probably take minus the certainty. Okay, let's get into AoE. Okay, area of effect. When it comes to area of effect, there's a lot more choice in the Zodiac because there are area of effect for spells and ranged attacks and area of effect for melee attacks. So in almost all these situations, there's going to be two, or it's going to be very non-specific. So in trait 1, obviously strong as strike, we talked about in the previous one with weapon range, same with AoE, but now you've got desperate tactic, which is a more ranged version, a more spell version. It's got the same amount, but obviously it's got extra stuff. Down in trait 2, same thing, Tyrant of Nature gives you some area of effect that's for melee, and then over in Swamp, any of the final ones have the same amount of area of effect depending on the spell, the element type you're using. Obviously, these could be used for melee if you're using elements as well, but that's there. Over in Leaf, you've got some area damage that leads into some area of effect and some area damage. The difference between weapon range and area of effect when it comes to the Zodiac, at least from what I see, is the difference that most of the area of effect is coupled with area damage, whereas weapon range is specific to weapon range and it doesn't really give anything extra in a lot of the cases. Up in 5, that's trap stuff we don't have to worry about. Over in Zodiac 6, Breath, the same we went for weapon range, is Annihilation. Again, it is nice area of effect, and it is flat area of effect, which can be a bigger difference overall, depending on how much percentage you have. Having a bigger base can help, But if you have already a big base, then the percent helps more, and it really comes down to, sort of how you have your build built. Again, area damage amplification here, and area damage, area of effect along the way. Very, very solid choice if you're an area build. Down in Ortimus, there is the not as great option of going down through Red Ant, which gives you some area of effect, and into Viper, which gives you area damage amplification. Not a bad use of your points. Definitely going to be better than the certainty option here when it comes to the weapon range version. Outside of that, we've got decertification, which, much like rock collision, is not particularly amazing along the way, but it is some area of effect if you're really trying to get that. Personally, I don't worry about this unless I'm already low on area of effect. I do try to get my area of effect elsewhere, because this is a lot of points to just get some area of effect and a little bit of other stuff. Outside of this, there are a ton of the specialties that do area of effect, and like I said, a lot of them are coupled with area damage. So you got Vigor gives area of effect, and then area damage amplification. Up here, you've got area of effect, area damage amplification. I noticed that is the trend with them. Again, the search bar here is your friend. Depending on your build, the specialties are going to be wildly different, but there's a lot of good choices in here. Okay, that's it for Zodiac. Let's go look at some, something. I don't know what. Okay, let's talk link runes. Oddly enough, there are exactly 2 link runes for weapon range and 2 link runes for area of effect. They both do the exact same thing for their counterpart. One increases the size. In this case, area of effect gives area of effect, oddly enough. And then its counterpart, concentrated area damage, makes a smaller area but gives more damage, which is nice. Its counterpart in weapon range is savagery, which gives you weapon range and melee damage amplification, and its counterpart, concentrated weapon range, makes the weapon range smaller and gives you more damage. Outside of that, I don't think there are anything in terms of toggles or anything else that do anything for area of effect or weapon range. We're going to check right now. There's weapon range. Those are just skills that have weapon range as one of the things on it. And I think area of effect is probably going to be the exact same. I don't think there's any toggles that... holy God, there's so many more AoEs. It's... Jesus, that's ridiculous. I don't think any of these actually affect your area of effect in any way, other than maybe some of them have things that as you gain lightning energy or something, you get more area of effect. But I don't think any of these directly affect area of effect on other skills besides themselves. So it's a very, very short thing. We're going to get into, I think, the gear, which is with uniques, or not with uniques, with authority modifiers and stuff, but this is one I just wanted to talk about quick because it's not a big deal and I don't think it's worth it anyway. In your Rune Hunter registry under Space Perception, there are area of effect link rune levels. Honestly, I don't know how effective this would be, depending how many link runes that you use that have area of effect tags on them. I honestly don't think it's worth, as opposed to getting something else that I think might be better, like a stats boost or something. But it is in there if you wanted that. Okay, let's get into probably the worst one, the gear stuff. Okay, gear stuff. I have spent probably the last 40 minutes flipping through authority essences and checking authority modifiers and options on so many types of gear. And surprisingly, there are very, very few that affect actual area of effect or weapon range. And I'm not talking about area damage. There's tons that have area damage, but when it comes to weapon specific, or not weapon specific, weapon range and area of effect that increase the size, there is really only a handful. The first one is the Authority Essence Alyssa, on weapons. You can get area of effect up to 20% or weapon range up to 22. Now, personally, I wouldn't take this unless I was in desperate need of area of effect, because getting item quality is going to make so much of a big difference in regards to your damage, especially late game, that this isn't worth it. If you're starting out and you're not really worried about optimizing your damage or anything, yeah, you could do the Alyssa and get the area of effect or the weapon range on here. And then on any weapon that has weapon range, there is the baked-in modifier of weapon range, which can be very, very high depending on the level. I don't know how important this would be to someone running a weapon range build to get this on a weapon as opposed to getting it in your Lacrima or somewhere else, but it is there. Outside of that, I have not found a single modifier that affects AoE or weapon range. Now, the one thing I did not do, and I'm absolutely not going to do it because it would take 1,000 years to check, would be to see if any of the crafting options land on something that could be good. When it comes to... Oh, I guess they're not done. When it comes to crafting options, I honestly have no idea if there is anything that would give you area of effect or weapon range from crafting another modifier. If there is, if you know of any, let me know in the comments so that I can get that information to other people. But I personally do not know any of them off the top of my head. I've never had a super duper need for area of effect or weapon range, as I've only really started using a weapon range build recently. And when it comes to area of effect, I don't feel that I need that much. I know some people like to be able to cover the entire screen with their attacks, but that's kind of boring to me. I like to have a smaller area that forces me to play differently. Okay, what else was there? There was something else I wanted to check, I think. I'll see if it is, and if not, see you in the outro. Okay, jewels. You wouldn't believe the fiasco I had to go through to find a jewel that I could actually go through and check the stats on. I had to go into a mine to get to the jewel chest so I could look at the options, because I don't have a star jewel available kicking around that I could do this with. So there are 3 star jewels that affect area of effect and 2 that affect weapon range. Ruthlessness is the first one, gives you area of effect and area damage. Red Ant is the next one, area of effect and area damage, same thing. And then way down at the bottom is Annihilation, which in my opinion is the best of the bunch, which gives area of effect and area damage amp. When it comes to weapon range, there is Sweep, which gives weapon range and strike damage amp, which is really good. And then Monkey Arm, which I'm so not going to be able to find again, am I? Oh, there it is. Weapon range and strike damage. Again, if you need weapon range, it is a good one. There are 2 black jewels that affect AoE. Empty Senses, which gives area of effect and area damage, and Dark Gunpowder, which gives hit rate and area of effect. As far as I can tell, that is it for all of the jewels. None of the other ones in any way affect your area of effect actual size. But there's tons that do AoE damage. But there you go. There's the, total of 7 jewel modifiers that do anything with weapon range or area of effect. Okay, avatars. I could have sworn that there was an avatar that increased weapon range, but I am wrong. The only one I can find is enhance range, and I think maybe that's why I was thinking of it. But it does increase your area of effect. Obviously, you get some damage along with that. But this is the only one that I can find for a passive from an avatar that gives you any kind of difference in your weapon range. I think that is everything. I'm going to double check. If not, I'll see you at the finish or something. I'm really tired. Okay, I am pretty confident that that is everything. I have checked the masteries and the orbs and the jewel score and charms. I think I have everything. I'm sure I missed stuff because I always do. But But that's it. As far as I know, those are all the ways that you can extend your range via weapon range or area of effect. Obviously, your builds are going to have, wildly different needs and, abilities to put zodiac points in. But as of right now, at the end of Season 5, that is it. If I missed anything, especially if I missed something that you feel is very important, please let me know in the comments. Outside of that, I hope this helps the person who asked me to make this video, because I don't remember who it was. Anyways, I'm gonna go get something to eat and maybe play a bit, and I'll see you in the next video.